when they're saying, oh, we can't afford to continue to cut grocery taxes. This is why, because of decisions to give more tax dollars to their constituents who have kids in private school.
Which side are you on? Which side are you on?
Robyn Hyden is the executive director for Alabama Arise. Alabama Arise is a statewide progressive nonprofit advocacy organization. They do great work advocating for poor and working folks down in Montgomery. Robyn, welcome back to the program. Really appreciate it.
It's great to be with you always.
It's great to have you. As listeners probably know, the session is rounding down. We have about 6 legislative days left, I think. So what is from your in your view, what are some of the highlights from the session, and what should we be looking for during these last 6 legislative days?
Well, good news, we're actually down to only 5 days left in the Alabama legislature, which is for those of us who lobby or watch what's going on, great news. I will say this has been an interesting session for people who fight for working folks. There have been a couple highlights. One is the legislature passed a bill to cover paid maternal and parental leave to all state employees and teachers. That was something that incredibly did not exist before this year. So when that goes into effect, it will be 8 weeks of paid maternity leave, 2 weeks of paid paternity leave for new parents. The second piece of news is that, we also had some maternal health legislation to make it easier for pregnant moms and pregnant people to get access to health insurance earlier in their pregnancy, which improves health outcomes and prenatal care. The bad news is, unfortunately, our lawmakers are continuing to prioritize expensive tax giveaways to people who don't need them. The first of those is the CHOOSE Act. This is a bill that diverted millions of dollars of our taxes, the taxes that you and I pay to the Education Trust Fund, sales taxes and income taxes. They actually diverted those into tax rebates for people who have their kids in private school. This year, they're trying to extend those by an additional $40 million. We think that's a terrible way to spend our money. Meanwhile, they're letting the grocery tax cut, which was supposed to go into effect over 2 years, continue to lag behind. So in the last 5 days of the session, Arise is really going to be urging everybody in this listening area, everyone in the state of Alabama, call your senator and say, why aren't y'all cutting the grocery tax? This was a commitment that was made 2 years ago. We know that the money is there if you're able to divert our tax dollars to corporate tax giveaways, to private school vouchers, but you're unable to cut the grocery tax by another cent. So going into the final weeks of session, this is something we're really looking to see.
Now, on the grocery tax cut, I'm sorry, on the grocery tax cut, I thought that had already passed. Did it pass one house or?
It did. It came out of the House. So
okay, but it never passed the Senate.
What's funny is that there's a basket where they put bills that come out of one house. They have to be taken out of the basket and brought to the other house. And that didn't happen for weeks and weeks. The House passed this grocery tax cut, and it was just sitting in the basket. So thankfully, the bill has been moved over to the Senate as of Thursday, and we're just waiting on our senators to act on it. So they need to feel that urgency. Next year, your state House representative, your state senator, they're going to be coming to you and asking you to vote for them. And you need to ask them, what have you done for me lately? Have you been looking out for the little guy, or have you been fighting for big business in your backyard? Because there's other opportunities to look out for the little guy. One of those is a bill that would take away state tax incentives from companies that are bad actors, companies that are supporting human trafficking, companies that are hiring child labor. There are auto suppliers in our state who have been found guilty of employing child labor at very unsafe working conditions. And they should be held accountable. We shouldn't be sending our tax dollars to support these industries that are not actually providing good jobs for adult workers in Alabama.
And at least that one that you were mentioning about child labor, that's SB 22, and we've been trying to follow that relatively closely. And SB 22, unfortunately, I think in my view, it wouldn't automatically revoke tax incentives from employers who violate child labor law, but it would allow the Department of Revenue to have that as an option, which right now it's not really, right. It's not part of the package deal, and that should at least be an option that the state can exercise. And right now it's not, and so SB 22 really is kind of in my view, like the floor of what should be acceptable as far as the strings that we attach to these public dollars, which are just huge amounts of investment that we are putting as the people of Alabama into these big employers. SB 22, it did pass the Senate relatively. I mean, it was relatively uncontroversial. Like, I don't even know if anybody voted against it. I mean, it was bipartisan. Lots of people, most senators obviously voted for it if it passed. And so where is that?
I believe it's actually passed out of committee in the House, so are just waiting for it to get on the House calendar. So that's another issue that if you wanna contact your state representative, your House member, and let them know you strongly support SB 22, there should be more accountability. You know, our lawmakers talk a lot about accountability for people who
Mm,
receive public benefit. This is a tremendous public benefit that we are paying corporations to locate here. In theory, we're paying them to hire Alabama workers and to provide good pay and good conditions. There needs to be some measuring stick and some accountability for that. So I am excited, though, that's a bill from Senator Marika Coleman Evans, and it is very close to final passage if we can get it on the House calendar.
how does it look as far as getting on the House calendar? Are you anticipating it being put on the House calendar?
Unfortunately, I think what we're seeing right now are a lot of divisions. So
Mm,
it is going to be tough to get any bill from a Democrat on the calendar for either the House or the Senate. The House and the Senate have conflict with each other. Democrats and Republicans have conflict with each other. There are conflicts within the Senate among various senators. So, you know, it's a matter of they're gonna prioritize what they perceive their voters prioritizing. I would encourage you to maybe talk to how and if you live in a district with one of the leaders of the House, Speaker Nathaniel Ledbetter, um, let them know that this should be a priority because
mm.
it you know, we have tried for several years to move this legislation ahead.
On education, you mentioned, I think that the Choose Act was going to be expanding. Can you talk to us some about that?
Yeah, I honestly feel like Adam knows about this more than I do, but you know, the Choose Act was huge bill last year that extended tax rebates for parents who are sending their kids to private schools or homeschool. And the research has now shown about a year into the program, the vast majority of people who got that tax rebate were already paying for private school. So the school, quote, so-called school choice advocates who are claiming this would expand choice for people. One, we're finding a lot of districts do not have a private school. Two, those that do, the cost is so prohibitive that only people who are already very well off are able to afford that school for their kids. And essentially, this is just a huge tax giveaway to people who don't need tax relief. They don't need a tax break. Um, our taxes in Alabama are already slanted towards the wealthy. We already overtax working class and low income people by relying too heavily on sales taxes. Our income taxes are basically flat. So, you know, whether you're making $15,000 a year or $150,000 a year, you pay the same percentage in income taxes. Actually, the wealthier person probably gets more tax breaks than the poorer person at the state level. And this is another way that we're fundamentally taking from people who can't afford it to give to people who don't need the help. So when we look at the decisions they're making when they're saying, "Oh, we can't afford to continue to cut grocery taxes," this is why, because of decisions to give more tax dollars to their constituents who have kids in private school.
Hey, 5 seconds. Just wanted to say that this is only possible because of our donors. If you want to see more of this, then consider donating yourself at tvlr.fm/donate.
There are a lot of moves across the South to try to lower the income tax, and there's been some agitation around that in Alabama, particularly like from talk radio people. And can you just explain, you mentioned that Alabama's tax system is regressive in no small part because we have such a reliance on the sales tax, as opposed to an income tax
or property
or a property tax. And so, yeah, I mean, the property tax is I think it is so low, if I'm remembering right, that if you doubled it, it would still be the lowest in the country. I mean, it's like crazy. But can you explain that dynamic? Because if somebody here, I'm not sure that everybody understands exactly like why is a sales tax more regressive than even like a flat income tax, which is basically what we have, in the state of Alabama.
Sure. So it's important to know, first of all, that the way that most states think of their tax system, it's a three-legged stool, and you want it to be equally as reliant on sales taxes, income taxes, and property taxes. Well, Alabama's stool is already very wonky because our property tax leg of the stool is so short. We undertax large landowners, timber owners, a lot of corporate property. And as a result, we have to make up for it somewhere else. So the sales tax leg of the stool, as a result, actually gets way too long. Part of the reason why is because our property and our income taxes are baked into the state constitution. This is not the way you should write your constitution. You shouldn't write a constitution 100 years ago and design your tax code for all posterity. We need our tax code to adjust to the world we live in today. So the people who wrote our tax code, actually 125 years ago into our Constitution, were plantation owners, and they wanted to benefit large landowners. And as a result, they artificially capped property taxes. Then later, when we got the income tax in the 1930s, it was a time of great progressive reform. We created and designed the income tax to fund public education. The income tax was initially a very progressive tax when it was designed. It only taxed people who made higher income levels. But over the years, because it was baked into our state constitution, it became less and less progressive until we were taxing poor folks at the same rate we're taxing rich folks. So in comes the sales tax. The sales tax is the one tax that you don't have to amend the state constitution to raise. As a result, it's a really easy way to raise money when you need to raise money. And that's how we ended up with a 10% sales tax in almost every county in the state. Now, the sales tax is a consumption tax. So what it means is every single person who has to buy goods and not services, we don't tax services, which is another reason it's unfair. But when I have to go buy food, there are minute differences between the most expensive food and the cheapest food, although increasingly, I would argue that it's less and less easy to find cheap, affordable groceries. But we tax your food at 10%, whether you have $0 of income or whether you're a millionaire. Everybody's got to eat. The cost to feed a household doesn't change that much. But we're taxing the poorest person for their food at the same rate as the richest person. There's no luxury tax, which some states do have a luxury tax. So they acknowledge, hey, maybe if you go to a very high-end restaurant, or maybe if you buy a luxury car or a yacht, you should pay more sales taxes for that versus someone buying a used car off of a lot. But Alabama is just, they're all treated the same. So the other issue is that we tax food and groceries, and most states fully exempt groceries. A lot of states partially exempt groceries. We only recently started reducing the grocery tax, but that matters because you can't live without food. There's a lot of other ways you can cut your expenses. So that's why we say that sales taxes are regressive. In a balanced budget and a balanced tax code, We would rely on some sales taxes. We would try to make those sales taxes um, incentivize, the kind of things we want to see. Like, we don't want to tax people further into poverty. In areas that rely on, say, like tourism, they might tax certain tourist expenses more because they know that's not going to hurt their locals, but that's going to allow all the revenue coming in from this industry to benefit local people. In a state like Alabama, one of our top largest industries is timber, but we are essentially diverting tax dollars that Alabamians pay in for public education, for public goods and services, to subsidize these industries and being undertaxed. So corporate income taxes, corporate sales taxes, corporate property taxes are another way that we can make our tax code more fair. And again, we should try to incentivize smaller business, entrepreneurship, instead of diverting so much of the tax benefits to large multinational corporations, many of whom are not headquartered here, and the profits don't always stay in our communities. So we have a great handbook, our tax and budget handbook on our website that goes into this in a little bit more detail to explain why, we systematically have not had enough money for education and for public goods and services like healthcare, criminal justice reform, even roads and bridges, public transportation, because of a tax code that was baked into our Constitution over 100 years ago. It was written in the era of Jim Crow. It was written as a direct response to progressive movement organizing, to efforts to make our state more fair and opportunities spread more widely. And when you compare us to states that have more opportunity and have more equality, you find that the tax code is one of those reasons why. It's interesting too when we organize people, it's hard to tell people that we need to raise taxes because the average working Alabamian already gets taxed a lot through those sales taxes, grocery taxes, income. Um, but what they're not seeing is that in other states that have more equity and have greater investment, wealthier people are paying more, and it shows up. It shows up in roads that are paved, in water that is clean, in schools that are well funded, in public amenities that are there for everybody. And sales taxes just are not a good way to fund government for another reason, because when we face a recession or an economic downturn, those are the first thing to go away. So when we most need government to step in and help out, if we're relying too much on sales taxes, or even relying too much on income taxes, those start to drop. And that's why we get hit so hard when there's an economic downturn. And so we've got our budgets that are dramatically out of balance. They're tilted too heavily towards wealthy people. And working folks should be upset about this. Like, it's not fair, and there are better ways to do it.
Robyn Hyden is the executive director of Alabama Arise, a statewide progressive nonprofit advocacy organization fighting for working and poor folks in Montgomery. Folks can be members of Alabama Arise and get updates about the legislature and things like that right in your email inbox or your mailbox. I get some mail pretty regularly from Alabama Arise. 20 seconds, how can folks get more involved in Alabama Arise if that's something they'd like to do?
Sure, 3 things really easy. Sign up for our emails on our website, alarise.org. Follow us on social media, Instagram, Blue Sky X. We post regular updates, action alerts, ways that you can get involved. And 3, connect with an event or an organizer in your local community. It's good to be connected to larger organizations if you're feeling isolated. We have members in pretty much every part of the state and almost every county. There's someone else who's like-minded, who is looking to connect and organize on these issues. So reach out to our organizers, and please connect, because we love to continue to build our movement. And we know that, not everyone has to agree on every single ideological issue, but the issues we work on are so fundamental. They're so broadly popular. It is issues that help workers and everyday folks. So we'd love to have you join us.
You just saw a clip from the Valley Labor Report. We are live every Saturday morning from 9:30 a.m. till 12:30 p.m. And we pride ourselves on keeping all of our content free to everybody so that we can talk to as many working folks as possible. If you support the work that we're doing, you think that it's important, you think that it's good, then consider making a monthly contribution to the project, and you can do that on our website, tvlr.fm.